Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Inside segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, getting promoted can be one of the most exciting moments in your career. But what happens when you're suddenly the boss and no one told you how to lead? Well, we're talking about how to be an effective manager. How do you gain the skills to lead when the promotion comes before the training? My guest has some very practical tools to help you boss up and succeed. Noel Massey is author of the book, Congrats, You've Been Promoted, an essential guide for helping new leaders and their teams succeed. Noel, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Hey, Harold, thanks for having me today. I look forward to our discussion over the next 30 or 40 minutes.
Thank you so much. So let me ask right off the jump, what makes a good manager?
Well, that's a big question. The way that I'll answer that is, first of all, a manager, supervisor, CEO doesn't really matter, has a role in the organization to produce results for clients, customers, etc. But you're going to do that whether you're the CEO or whether you're the frontline manager or supervisor through the individuals that report to you. No CEO works on the front line. When I was president of UPS's U.S. delivery operations, and when I was a president of a business unit, I had 5 separate business units as a president. I never drove a truck. I never got in the hole and did the work. I did that in the beginning of my career.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but what happened is I never forgot what that journey looked like, particularly for the newly promoted leader. And I want to put this out there early in this conversation, Harold, or for someone who wants to be promoted. You know, I've done seminars with young people, say 40 and below. That's typically the age where this begins showing up in their life. And many of them were not in leadership positions. But when I asked the room, how many of you want to be a leader in your career or life? Every hand goes up. It always does. And the fact of the matter is that you don't wait until you get the position. You start working on the things necessary to get the position. Think of it from this perspective, Harold. You know, a person that wants to make a life in sports, they don't start trying to become that when they graduate from college, okay? That's probably not going to work. Or when they get to college. If they want to play football, they needed to start doing that real early in their life, or basketball, or any art, musician. It doesn't matter. Leadership's the same thing, except here's the difference. There's no curriculum in any university, and I work with a few, that has a curriculum that says leader, future leader. Get a degree to become a future. That doesn't work like that. Generally what happens, whether it's a law firm or a donut shop or Amazon or Costco, someone gets there, they do a great job driving a forklift, and then the next day they come to work and the manager says, I want to promote you to lead the forklift drivers. And that moment happens quickly, and they're really not prepared for what's going to come next. And so getting prepared means not waiting to that moment, but it's preparing. So the book is really for people in the role, but also people aspiring to the role.
I asked about managers and you spoke about leaders. What's the difference?
It's very key. You know, you don't manage people, you lead people. And that's just a natural kind of thought process people can get their head around. You know, you manage processes and you manage data. You don't manage human beings. Human beings expect to be led. As a matter of fact, people that approach the job as a manager generally don't engage heavily with people. And I've seen that more times than I can shake a stick at. You know, as a president of U.S. delivery operations, in my final role from 2016 to 2019, I had people around a couple 100,000 people, about 12,000 leaders under that led that group of individuals. And as a president of a business unit, I had about 30,000 people with around 2,000 to 3,000 that did that. The point is I saw a lot of people get promoted and not engage with their people. and they flamed out real fast. The ones who approached the role as a leader, meaning approaching them emotionally, did much better, obviously quicker. So here's what leadership is. And just to land the plane on that point you asked, leadership is this, Harold, and it's nothing beyond this. And I talk about this in the book as well as the masterclass I developed that aligns with the book. But leadership is the ability to influence the behavior of an individual or a group of people without coercion. And that's really key, without coercion. It means that you have the ability to motivate and lead them through influence that you provide to the group by using leadership approaches and techniques. It's not rocket science, but there is a science to it.
I think one of the other issues that we've seen in the wild, so to speak, is that new managers often struggle after a promotion. Why do you suppose that is, where they are thrown into a leadership position where now they must manage, organize people under them? Why do they struggle?
Because of their paradigms. Number one, because they haven't been taught or trained. I happen to work for an organization where very early in my life, I was a college student, electrical engineering student, San Jose State University. I needed a job to pay for my education. And that's how I landed at UPS, number one, to begin with. And after a couple of months, I became a supervisor over at night loaders, that kind of thing. But there was great mentorship in the organization that I was a participant in. Early in my career, I had mentors. I had people that were coaching me on leadership. And after a few years in that role, I was about to graduate college, and I'd actually accepted a job from Hewlett-Packard, but I didn't. And I told my manager I was doing that, and he says, "Oh, wait a minute. You're doing really great, and we have more we'd like you to do." And that's when I took over a group of about 100 individuals. But to the point that you asked, preparation to become a leader is not something that's natural. Leadership is not a natural talent. It has to be learned. And so that means you need to make an investment in doing that. And where most individuals fail when they get promoted, and you said something that's absolutely a little bit different than someone thrown into being a manager. Listen, the job was open, Harold. There was a promotion available. And they raised their hand and went, "Pick me, pick me, pick me." Well, you know what? They got picked. And now that they got picked, they need to do the work required that it says, "I want to be responsible." Literally, that's what you're saying. I'm not saying anything else, but I want to be responsible for the output of this group of individuals. I want to be responsible for that. So then you take responsibility. And that means that you get close to the action. You know what your people do every day. You don't sit in an office and manage your report. When I would promote someone, and I would promote people, particularly as a president, that would be CFOs and directors of human resources, big jobs. But throughout my career, I promoted a lot of people. I honestly, over a 40-year career, I easily over 1,000 people I promoted. That being said, I would never let them start the position looking at reports and charts, because that's always what they wanted to do. Okay. They wanted to look at reports and charts. It was like, no, I just gave you 20 people. Okay. You need to go meet all 20 of them, and you need to sit down with them as individuals and introduce yourself to them and let them introduce themselves to you. And number one, as a leader, it's not your meeting, it's their meeting. You need to understand what's on their minds, what's going well for them, what's not. Then you need to understand the jobs they do for you, which means spending time with each one of them in the job they actually do. You need to establish the terms and conditions between you and the group immediately. And the foundation of my book is about that very principle, the terms and conditions of value-based leadership. That's what it's about, Harold. It's about everyone has them. Everyone has terms and conditions. It's about the leader understanding that principle and engaging immediately with it when they meet their new team.
So when you first started in your management position, that very first one that you just spoke about, did you make any mistakes?
Oh my goodness. That's how you learn. I made a ton of mistakes. My book, it has a lot of them in there. And as a matter of fact, I use mistakes to teach, right? I talk about, well, let me give you an example of why this didn't work well. I made a lot of errors, particularly in the very beginning when I'm 20 years old, right? You know, I took the position and I was going to be the leader, and I got promoted, and the people were going to do what I asked them to do, and blah, blah, blah. But you find out real fast, it doesn't work like that, okay? That your results are come from their results. It's that simple. And if they want you to have bad results, they can probably do that pretty quick, okay? But I also learned how to overcome those mistakes from people that were very good at it. The one thing, if someone were to ask me, what was consistently something you did through your promotion trail in your entire career, is when I was promoted, I'd always seek out who was the best at that thing, right? And I would develop a relationship with that person to kind of understand their ethos around leadership, right?
Yeah, but let me stop you because maybe I wasn't clear. That was my mistake. What was the biggest mistake you made?
Oh, geez. Not getting to know individuals, not on their terms. Number one, I think I said that, is that I didn't introduce myself to the team. I didn't do that. I mean, my first group, it was like 10 people or something like that. And, you know, I took the position and I immediately started giving orders and assignments and the typical stuff that new leaders do, which I say don't do in the book. And I talk about how I modified that later in my career to not have the same error. But I got to know the individuals. I got to know Harold, and I got to know Harold on his terms. And I got to know who Harold was, and if Harold had a family, and if Harold had a sick parent, and if Harold didn't want overtime. And I got to know all of those things about Harold. And so Harold started to understand that I was willing to invest in Harold. And when Harold understood that, it made the relationship and the work we did together way better. But I made that mistake really early in my career. The other mistake, and this is an important one, is the role of the leader, the role of the supervisor is to be the expert in the work. Now, and don't, let's not minimize that. Is that, most times people will get a group of people and they may have 3 or 4 different kinds of jobs within that group. Okay, you should never be asking people to do things you don't know or understand. So the whole point of that is know what you don't know, then get to know it. And so you have to put your ego at the door and be very humble around that. And so if you have employees with different job definitions, because you may have been in one position and you get a group of people that have 5 or 6 different things they do, I would spend the whole day with the person. As a matter of fact, when I became a manager of a group of delivery drivers, I had like 50 delivery drivers. My first manager role as a delivery business manager. I rode with every single one of those 50 people. That particular operation was doing very poorly, had just a slew of customer complaints all over the place. But I took the time to go out and spend the entire day for 10 hours with each one of those 50 delivery drivers. By the time I got through the 10th person, the respect level in the whole group changed massively. And when I started engaging them in problem solving for things, those problems got solved. Because another natural law is this: as a leader, understand you're not the smartest person on the block. If you got people working for you, they know their job better than you probably know it. And they can solve for things in that position probably better than you can. And here's the bottom line on that. And that's not fluffy copybook kind of stuff. People support things. It's a natural law, Harold. People support the things they help create. And when they help create solutions, then they support solutions. When
Hold
solutions,
that point. No, hold that point because I need to take a quick break, but I'll let you finish the point on the other side. Don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. Coming up, the original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon. That's next on WHUR. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about how to be an effective manager. How do you gain the skills to lead when the promotion comes before the training? My guest is Noel Massey, author of the book, Congrats, You've Been Promoted, an essential guide for helping new leaders and their teams succeed. Noel, before the break, you were talking about knowing the job that you are managing people to do. But what do you say to those people who would argue that you can't know everything and that it is better for you to hire or have hired for you people who are those experts?
well, first of all, when we left, I talked about people support the things that they create. I don't want to leave that because this is really important. So,
okay, go ahead.
You know, in my role as a president, even as a manager early in my career, natural disasters are part of what happens. You have to get through them. Hurricanes, floods, tornadoes. Just because you have a hurricane, a flood, or tornado doesn't mean a hospital doesn't get their products. They still need syringes. So when you're in the supply chain world, you don't get to have problems like storms and fires where you go, okay, I guess we're going to shut down until it's over. It just doesn't work like that. So you have to solve for how to execute in those conditions. And the best way to do that is to talk and include the people that are going to go out there and do that, right? You're in the leadership role, but you're not going to go deliver through a flood. You're not going to go deliver after a hurricane's happen. That's going to be an employee. So leaders who ignore, including the person in the process, are leaders that have egos. They need to check at the door, right? Because it's going to go way better when the people that get things done are part of the solution. All the organization wants is an outcome, right? That's all we want is an outcome. We want an outcome that's successful. And getting hung up on the fact that that outcome has to come from the leader is a fatal flaw all the time. And I learned that over many, many years. I watched a manager who had been through a hurricane. We went through a devastating one in Virginia when I was a president there. And this manager starts the emergency plan, and he's got 100 employees in the room, and he starts handing out him and his supervisors, here's the plans. And immediately a 30-year driver starts shaking his head, right? And this manager was smart because that was a sign. It's like a hazard sign you see on the street. When you see the signs on the street and you see a hazard sign, what do? You slow down. When you see them in human beings, you got to do the same thing. You slow down. And that manager was smart. And he said, okay, Frank, I see you shaking your head. There are people in the room now. He says, what's going on? He goes, hey, listen, we've been through a hurricane too. We can't even get out of our own homes. And the organization is asking us to come in an hour early so we can get to hospitals and nursing homes. But we need to rethink some of this. And the manager said, hey, you know what? No disrespect to you folks. We will relook at these expectations. I need 5 volunteers to help me solve for this. Like 80 hands went up, right? Okay. And he picked 5 people. They ideated out a plan. The next day they presented it to the group, and it went like clockwork. Why? Because the employees helped develop it, and it went like clockwork, and it was in an emerging circumstance. That is a big miss that many organizations make, and I've seen it time and again. It's a mistake. Include people, because people support what they help to create. They always do. Now, you know, to pick up on the point, I think we opened up with a different point that you were driving at.
Well, yeah, I was just saying that. So, for example, we often take a look at government. A governor or a president or a mayor or what have you, if a person is elected or someone who is used to managing but may know nothing about the widgets that a company creates. That's different from, like you say, knowing the job as well as or better than the people who do the job. And some people would suggest you may not know the job, but you hire or bring people in who do know the job.
Then you go get to know the job. You don't make an excuse and say, well, I'm not, I'm the new COO, and I have people that change light bulbs for a living. They're maintenance people. And I never did that before. But they work for me now. Then you go spend the whole day with the maintenance guy. I actually had that happen. I had a company I was working with in Cincinnati that hired a new COO. And she had great potential, great leader, but she didn't know all the roles in this company. And I was a mentor for her. I was working with her in a consultant capacity. I said, okay, the next time we met, talked about what she wanted to accomplish. She had all these big visions and mission statements and grandiose. I said, listen, that's great, but vision doesn't execute outcomes, right? People do. So go spend time with every single person that's going to work under you. And we'll talk about this in 2 months. And she did that. And I actually tell a story like this in the book. And I met with Lauren. Her name's Lauren. And I met with her in like 60 days. And the two CEOs had hired me to help them develop their organization. And it was a night and day circumstance. She felt massively great about her ability now to understand how to lead this group of people because she knew what they were doing. She knew what work they were doing. And she spent the day with all the maintenance folks because they had a couple thousand buildings they were managing or something. She spent the day with the sales team to listen to them. She answered the phone with them. Okay. She listened to the customers' concerns with them. Well, needless to say, her confidence shot through the roof, right? Because once you know something, right, confidence comes from knowing, right? Confidence comes from doing. If I say, go drive through this oil slick and you see it on the street, and I want you to get through this oil slick and you've never done it before, your confidence that you're going to get through that's going to be pretty low. But if you've done it 20 times on a track in practice, and then you get in real life and now you see it, your reaction is going to be very different than if you'd never seen it before. So the point is that you need to understand what you want your people to do in order to coach them. And then the skills necessary to be excellent at doing it are also in the book. The book is not theoretical. It has tactical skill development approaches to work with your team on conflict resolution, how to train them, how to teach them how to drive a forklift if necessary. All of those things are part and parcel of what I've contained in this piece.
But let's talk about theory, because not everyone who is listening to this is ever going to work for UPS. But I'm sure that there are some practical applications. And one of them is if you are one of the staff, one of the line workers, one of the people in the office pool, and then all of a sudden now you are managing your peers when you were before just working with them.
Yep.
How do you do that well without problems?
You become a value-based leader and you establish that on the front end. Number one, I always recommend to organizations that they don't do what you just said. That familiarity breeds contempt. That's just a fact of life. Okay. It happens in homes. It happens, between friends that, when you meet someone, they have this high level of respect for you. And over time, they start to take you for granted. That actually happens in work groups. And so whenever we would promote someone from a delivery driver to a supervisor, we'd put them with a different group of people that didn't know them, right? Give them a clean slate. But if you can't do that, it really goes to the approach that's taken. And in part one of the book, and we didn't talk about this, I really talk about what the new leader needs to do day one, like literally. Day one, you meet your team. I've been promoted, happy to be your new leader. You establish, Harold, the terms and conditions in the team. What do I mean by that? In our team, integrity is important to me as a leader. Understand, you can always expect from me that integrity is going to be number one. Number one, you know what I'll say to your audience, is the foundation of leadership. Integrity involves keeping your word, being truthful, letting your people know that when you ask me something, I'm going to give you an honest answer to that. And I will keep my word to you as a group. Ethics. Ethics matter. The honorable conduct towards others. In our group, ethical behavior is going to be foundational for me as your leader. And I expect us all to understand it's foundational in our group. You know, we're going to have long days, hard days, and tough days. But let me tell you today, team, we're not having one that lacks integrity. And we're not having one that's unethical. If it's not right, we're not doing it. If it doesn't make sense and there's something twitchy about it, we're not doing it. I want to know about that. Bring that to me, and I will always protect your integrity and your ethics. Favoritism. Let me finish with this one.
Okay, go ahead.
It's real important for the leader to understand that favoritism is always an issue in teams. It always is. And if the leader isn't intentionally leading with the things you just heard me talk about, these things will emerge. But when the leader says, no, we're going to have a fair workplace, there will be no favorites. And that's when you're in the one-to-one meetings, when you're meeting in the Heralds one-on-one, where you really get a chance to have that dialogue, you know, in a simple way and establish those relationships. And when that's done, things go way better. They go way better than if they're not done. Understand?
How do you determine whether or not to be a hands-on or micromanager or a hands-off manager?
Well, first of all, you should never be a micromanager. You should train your people well enough where you trust that they know how to do their job. And if you have any doubt in that area, then you need to erase that yourself. You need to go spend the time with them, training them. The most important role of the supervisor is to train their people. You know, it's not extra work. You know, you were given, you raised your hand and said, pick me for the job. That means you took on the responsibility to train the new forklift driver. That's what you did. So in certifying someone to drive a forklift, your job is to train them. And if you do that properly, using the 7 steps of effective training, which I talk about in the book, you will know they know. There won't be a doubt about whether they know. You'll have confidence that they know. And it goes in a simple way. Hey, Harold, I'm going to certify you to drive the forklift. We're going to use the 7 steps of effective training and do that. There's 37 steps in this forklift process for you to be certified, Harold. I know you bid on this job. You want this job. You've been a great employee. So I know you're going to put all your effort into it. And I'm using what's called the BEST principle as we speak. And then I'm going to stick to the objective and train you to drive this forklift. So when we're done and I test commitment, you're going to be able to go through the 37 steps with me. So I know you know. And if the leader has anyone under them that they can't do that with, then that's on the leader. The leader needs to understand they have to understand everyone's role completely. And that's where you get, and that's where leaders get in trouble, when they don't apply that personal effort in doing that. You know, because here's another natural truth, Harold. There's only one thing an individual gets to control every single day. Only one, their own behavior. That's it. A leader gets to control what's important to them, what they want to do, and they get to control their own behavior. So they're going to do the things they care about. And learning the job is central. I've seen a lot of leaders fail because they didn't want to spend the time working with each individual person to know the role the person was fulfilling. I've seen a lot of leaders fail.
So on the issue, and you kind of touched on this a little bit in one of the examples that you used when someone was kind of laying out a plan and Frank was shaking his head. But in that particular instance, the leader or manager made an observation and solicited an opinion. you don't always get that with those who are in management positions. They don't ask what staff, what the employees think about a plan. They just say, here's the plan, do it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So what would you say to managers, veterans and new managers, about constructive criticism or observation from the rank and file? How do you do that? How do you make them feel comfortable? I don't know how many times I've heard I have an open door policy and never the door should truly be breached.
If you meet all of your individual people day one as their leader and you set up a meeting, I guarantee you for 30 minutes with each person, I don't care if it's 20 of them, you'll never have that moment, Harold. You never had that moment because you took the time to sit down with Harold and you established with Harold when you took the job in a private meeting where you and him had coffee and you said, here are the terms and conditions in our relationship. Tell me, Harold, what's important to you. Write down the 5 most important things to you from me as your boss, and you're going to write them down. Okay, and then after you do that, we'll talk about them. And I already know what they're going to be. Listening when I have an opinion, showing, people don't sell you their dignity. They don't sell you their respect. All those things, if they're done properly, that moment you're talking about won't happen because I've met with all 20. I know my 20 people. I know Harold more than as a group member. I know him as an individual. And so when I saw him shaking his head in that meeting, when the meeting adjourned, I went over to him and said, Harold, I can see you have some concerns. Okay, I can see whether I brought it up in the meeting or not. The point is, if I walk over to you, and I've done this 1,000 times in my career, and I go, hey, Harold, I see you have some concerns. And generally, Harold, it's going to be the influencers. People understand influencers in social media. They understand every group has influencers. And the leader needs to know who those are immediately. Who are the people in this group that the rest of the group looks to as an informal leader, right? There's an influencer in this group. And you can always tell how a group feels by talking to that person. And I talk about that as well in the book, is identify the influencers first. Know who they are in your group. Those are the people that are going to be the ones who telegraph and tell you. They're not going to hide anything. They're going to tell you what's up. Anytime you ask, they're going to tell you. And so you have to be able to spot. You get to see what you want to see in the same way when you're driving down the road in your car. You get to see what you want to see. And the fact of the matter is that if you don't want to see the signs, you're not going to see the signs. If you want to see the signs, you're going to see the signs. But when you see the signs, acknowledge the signs, recognize the signs, and address the signs. Never ignore the signs. If you ignore the signs, you will have a crash, just like you would if you were driving your car.
So if you are a veteran and never had the meeting, okay?
Yep.
Let us say that you have performed well as a veteran manager. You've been in the position, let's say 3 years or 4 years or even 5 years, never had that sit down because for whatever reason, the job that was done before you got there was done well and you just almost as a caretaker. Would you still recommend that 3, 4, 5 years in as a manager that you still sit down with the 20 people?
Absolutely. It's irrelevant. Number one, that should be something that the leader makes a habit of doing on an annual basis. Number one. Okay, your work is a result of what your people do. And if your people are going to do well for you, it's because they believe you're going to do well for them. And this isn't copybook or fluffy management. As a matter of fact, the highest levels of accountability exist here. So it doesn't matter how long you've been in the role. One of the things that I did, I'm a development-oriented individual.
What does that mean?
That means that the role of the leader is one thing and one thing alone, to develop their team. That's what their job is, to develop the people under them. Whether I was a supervisor with employees when I first became one, or a manager, all the way to when I was a president, my role was to develop the people under me. I wasn't going to run the HR department when I was a president. I wasn't going to run engineering. I wasn't going to run the sales team. But when I would drive to work, I would talk to someone pretty much daily in a development conversation. That was an executive leader. And I did that most of my career. So Harold worked under me. I said, hey, Harold, I'm going to give you a call. What day's good? On my way in, I'm going to give you a call so we can just kind of talk about what's on your mind. Those conversations matter because it creates congruence, right? There's no fuzzy between how you see things and how I see them. There's congruence between us. There's an understanding because you had your time to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. And generally, my questions would be, so what do you want to talk about? And Harold would talk about whatever. And I'd say, okay, Harold, who are you developing in your team? Give me the name of one person you're developing specifically as their mentor, as their coach. And I would look for an answer. And I'd say, okay, so what is it that you want Tom to do better? And you would say, this is what I want him to do. And I'd say, okay, so did you think about this technique? Or did you think about this? Or ask him these questions, Harold. When you meet with him tomorrow, ask him these things. And so that was development. I'm a very development focused person. I don't get into tasks that we make the making numbers is an outgrowth of results of the work of people. That's where they come from. Getting things done, great customer service means a leader intentionally is investing in having that, not just hoping it emerges or getting rid of people, indiscriminately because they're angry, because emotions have no place in this conversation, to be honest with you, not to the point where thought is lacking. So that's what I would say, whether they've been with them 5 years or 5 days. Yes.
Interesting. So do you believe that handling conflict or tension on a team is difficult to manage? Because sometimes these things are professional, sometimes they're personal. So how do you address that?
Well, the leader decides how personal things get in the group. Number one, the leader is not a social worker. Personal issues have no place.
But hold on, no, this is 2025.
Yep.
And I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that. There are a lot of modern theories about the reality. Yeah, I come from a background, in the news business and in 40 years of doing the news, where a news director, no matter what his or her tone may have been in saying that, is do the work, or you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. But you have now, you may have some aspects of social work that have to do with the development of employees in order to get them to understand. I mean, this was, golly, some 20 years ago, maybe even 25 years ago, where I had a conflict with an employee, went into the news director's office, and he listened to both sides, and he said 3 words. He said, "Work it out." Period.
That doesn't mean that leader you spoke to, Harold, was an effective or good leader. Okay,
true, but
no, just a minute now. Just a minute. Yeah. Number one, doesn't mean that person was a good leader. I'm just going to tell you, I had executive leaders under me, and not everyone's a good leader. Number one. Okay, number one. What I'm saying is there's an approach universally that can be taken with people in situations of conflict, performance reviews, etc., that minimizes and addresses the things you just talked about. There are bad leaders. There are people that are dogmatic. And listen, I'm going to just say this, that's not going to produce the highest outcome. People get leadership roles, doesn't mean they were the right person for the job. But when I said the leader is not a social worker, what I meant by that is a leader needs to understand that the things that they facilitate, because that's what I want to talk about, and develop happen in the workplace, right? Employees are going to have personal problems. They're going to come in and be in the middle of a divorce. They're going to come in and be in the middle of a child that has a drug problem. They're going to come in and there are things the leader has no business engaging in. And those are the things I'm talking about. Only to the extent that whatever the help the employee needs in those moments, right? You know, like I can't work you 15 hours a day if you and your wife are going to go meet with your child's drug counselor every Thursday. I need to be aware of that, right? So I'm not saying that the leader is supposed to be numb. As a matter of fact, that's a mistake. If the leader doesn't know those things, that's on the leader. You get to know what you want to know. And when you know your people and they understand that you want transparency so you can serve them better, that's not social work. That's leadership. And as far as conflict, in my book, I have a technique, Harold, and you haven't seen the content, so I understand this. It's called the 4x5 method. The 4x5 method. I'm going to say that again, the 4x5 method. The 4x5 method is a technique. It's a structure. It's no different than when I talked about that oil slick. It's so that when something happens to you, you are prepared for that moment. Okay, you're prepared to drive through that oil slick. It's not the first time you've seen it. And so the 4x5 method is a method that says the way people think and the way that you respond in congruence with how they think can help de-escalate a moment. It can also produce a win-win outcome between you and the person or other people, whatever it is. People look at things when they work for an organization, and I want to make this specific to when they're at work, right? Not when they're outside work. People look at things through 4 lenses when they're in their job. The first one, an obvious one, is their own lens. The second one is the lens of the company. The third one is the supervisor's lens or the boss's lens. And the fourth one is the customer's lens, who's buying from you, that lens. And so when a problem emerges, the supervisor has a choice. You know, Harold didn't get his pay. Harold's missing a day's pay. 1 day pay is missing. And he comes at the supervisor hot. Hey, you know, my check's wrong. I want to get paid, blah, 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 right? And so the 4x5 method, when practiced, and that's important.
Real quick, because I only have about 2 minutes left. So go ahead.
The supervisor has to pick what perspective to talk to Harold through. And I'm going to choose Harold's and approach Harold with empathy. And then I'm going to use the right intensity. Intensity 1 is the lowest. Intensity 5 is the highest. Harold came at me at a 5. He was angry. Well, I'm not going to meet Harold at a 5. I'm going to meet him at a 1. Hey, Harold, I understand. Your check's wrong. I know why you're angry. Here's what you're going to get from me, Harold, because I used your perspective. I understand why you're upset, not mine. I didn't come at you with a company policy. I came at you with your perspective, and I was empathetic. And then I said, Harold, here's how this is going to work. You have my word that today I will get to the bottom of why that day of pay is missing on your check. I will have an answer for you. Now, the key is I have to keep my word. That's how I establish trust with Harold. That's how I de-escalate Harold. I have that technique in the book with a bunch of exercises. And make no mistake, I've taught that thousands of times in 40 years. It works.
Well, Noel, I think that's going to have to be the last word. I really appreciate your time. Noel Massey, author of the book, Congrats, You've Been Promoted, an essential guide for helping new leaders and their teams succeed. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Harold. Nice talking to you. Enjoyed your show.
Sure thing. That is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, July 29th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.